Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 23 of What If Naruto Was the Red X. If you guys enjoy this what if, and want to see part 24 of it, comment down below, and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Harley happily bobbed her head from side to side with a small smile across her lips. What a wonderful day, the plants are green, the flowers are all bright and colorful, the city is in ruins as far as the eye can see, and the people are running and screaming in terror. It reminds me of home. Harley said to herself with a sigh, while Ivy was grunting and rubbing her temples with an irritated frown. Would you please be quiet, Harley? I'm picking up something unusual from my babies. Ivy pleaded before grimacing once more as her head started to feel like it was splitting open. Why in the hell were they spreading out so far? She didn't want to totally cover the earth in mutant plants after all. What was the point? It'd be no different than all of humanity destroying her babies themselves. Ah, what's the matter, Red? Your head hurting you or something? Harley asked while leaning back with her arms crossed under her head at the odd angle. Yet for the most part Harley was completely comfortable. She had to admit that, when Ivy wanted to improve you, she spared no expense. Unfortunately, yes Harley, my babies seem more and more active. Some of them are even growing at a rate I didn't predict. At the rate they're going, they'll reach the desert outside the city and possibly a freshwater area, where they might just start to take permanent root. And if that happens, they'll start adapting to a point they won't need my mist to survive, and could grow at an exponential rate. Ivy explained while rubbing her temples and wondering why she always ended up explaining everything to Harley. Wait, how are they doing that? You're in control of those plants, ain't you? Harley questioned with a confused expression, and Ivy visibly grimaces as the minds of the many plants start talking to one another through her. Yes, no, I don't even know anymore. The plants have grown and evolved to such a state that they no longer need me to give them orders. They've gained basic animal instincts, and are starting to adapt a will of their own. Ivy explained, and Harley frowned for a moment, keeping her head back while crossing her arms over her chest. So, basically what you're saying is that they're growing up? Harley questioned, and Ivy nodded her head slowly. The analogy seemed to work better than anything she could come up with. Yes, and unfortunately they're turning out to be very, very rowdy when they get like this. Ivy stated, and Harley tilted her head to one side with a confused expression. But you're Poison Ivy. Surely you can control a little city's worth of giant mutated plants. Harley stated with her arms outstretched, and Ivy couldn't help it as she frowned towards her blonde friend. Harley, I'm not that. Ivy started to say, only for Harley to start on a rant. But you're the personal assassin of Mother Nature. The poisonous princess of the plant kingdom. The badass botanist bitch. The felonious flower you Poison Ivy herself. How can you lose control of a few rowdy plants? Harley questioned with her arms placed on her hips, and Ivy frowned deeply. Harley, calm down. Ivy ordered flatly, a deadly tone to her voice, as the nagging migraine made her even more moody than usual. Seeing the positively furious look on her red-haired friend's face, Harley instantly fell silent, while Ivy grit her teeth and wrung her fingers through her hair. The area of the city is much larger than anything I've ever tried to control before. The amount of plants spread out across the area is so numerous that I'm unable to control more than a few dozen at a time. Ivy started to explain and then grimaced once more when she felt something big start trying to speak to the smaller plants around the city. Not only that, but my babies have grown to a point where they are as alive as you or me. They are even thinking and talking to one another to some small extent. This is why I can no longer control them. They have started to link to one another. Unfortunately, they're using me as a sort of main hub, thus all my migraines recently. Ivy finished explaining to the blonde-haired clown girl, and Harley frowned for a moment. Well, that ain't good at all. What happens when they decide they don't want me or you here? Harley questioned, and Ivy rolled her eyes for a moment. That won't happen, Harley. I'm half plant, and in case you've forgotten, you're part plant since I changed you. Ivy reminded, and Harley blinked before shrugging her shoulders and leaning back further, her spine making a near-perfect sideways L. I don't even think about that anymore, Ivy. My point is, what happens when those plants don't like the human that's still in us? Harley then questioned with an uncharacteristically serious expression over her face. In response, Ivy suddenly blinked, then mulled that over for a moment, before shaking her head. They won't. Without me, they have no way of surviving a prolonged period on their own, Harley. So long as they need me, they'll allow me to do as I wish. Besides, any that tried to attack me would be child's play to control. Ivy reminded, and Harley rubbed her arms worriedly. That I understand, Ivy. What I don't is what happens to me. Harley reminds, and Ivy frowned once more. You just stay close to me and I'll ensure you're protected as well, Harley. I won't let my babies hurt you. Ivy tells the blonde, and Harley grins, though it obviously doesn't reach the girl's eyes, and Ivy doesn't seem to notice. Sewers. I hate sewers. Naruto mumbled as he made his way further down the sewers, those behind him in complete agreement with him. Stop whining, at least you don't have to walk in this shit. Batgirl reminded as she and Cyborg trudged through slime, shit and only God knew what else while following the black-clad thief. Said thief shrugged his shoulders, making liberal use of water walking, so he wouldn't have to walk in the sewer, while Supergirl and Raven both floated over the water. Man, how do you do this shit? I can somewhat understand you're an elemental type warrior, but to be able to walk on water. Since when are miracles on a ninja's list of techniques? Cyborg asked and Naruto scoffed. It's not, Tinhead. Believe me when I say that this little trick is most definitely not the work of the divine. Naruto stated while Raven sighed and flew next to him while giving him a look. Be nice, we're actually helping you for once. She reminded and Naruto gave her a look in response. No? I'm helping you guys, when you've gotten yourself over your heads. Again. The ex-shinobi stated and Raven rolled her eyes, while Cyborg grumbled under his breath. Seriously Card-chan, I'm starting to see a pattern. You guys get in over your head, I come save you, and once I save your collective asses, the kid tries to throw me in jail. Naruto suddenly says in his mind, Raven picking it up and frowning in thought, truth be told that was actually pretty true. Well, it could be worse. She offered and Naruto snapped his head over to her with a raised brow. What? She mentally questioned with a raised brow and Naruto smirked beneath his mask. You're being optimistic Card-chan, that's new. He replied and the girl blinked while looking more than a little surprised. Wow, you're right. She mused then sighed, before giving him a sidelong glare. I swear Naruto, you're starting to rub off on me a little too much. She intoned mock seriously, and Naruto rubbed his chin, while keeping a lookout for any of Ivy's plants. I am? Does that mean you're rubbing off on me then Card-chan? Naruto wondered and Raven snorted while Cyborg looked between the two with confusion. Not possible, my personality is nearly non-existent, since I suppress my emotions. Yours on the other hand, it's like a fungus, it sticks to you, and just won't let go. Raven stated playfully, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Man, what is up with you two? Cyborg questioned and Raven blinked before thanking Azar her HUD was up to hide her blush. Nothing Cyborg. She offered quietly, and Naruto nodded his head. Yeah Tin Man, why? Did it look like something was going on? Naruto questioned while turning his head to look at the half-metal teen. Not sure, kind of looked like you were talking or something, but without actually speaking. Cyborg replied simply and Naruto shrugged his shoulders while Raven floated forward a little. Coming to a corner, Naruto held up a hand to signal for the others to stop while he turned and looked around. Can't see anything up ahead man, it'd be so much easier to navigate around the plants if we had some kind of a sonar to track them. Naruto mumbled to himself, and Cyborg slapped his face in realization. Give me a minute, I've got one, but it needs a few minor tweaks. The metal teen stated, while looking to his left arm and tweaking a few wires, while Supergirl flew over to Naruto and looked at him strangely. What? Naruto finally asked and the blonde sighed. I wanted to say, thanks for sending me out with Wonder Girl earlier. Supergirl offered uncomfortably, and Naruto raised a brow. After the fuss you made I thought you'd be mad at me. Naruto noted and Supergirl nodded her head. And you're right, I was more than a little mad. But, while we were out I heard someone screaming for help. Donna wasn't able to hear it, and we only just made it in time to save a little girl that was trapped in a collapsed building. So, thanks for her. Supergirl explained and Naruto nodded his head. That's one of my main reasons I sent you with her. Your super hearing and X-ray vision make you a perfect choice for searching for survivors. Your strength and ability to fly makes you optimum for rescue. Raven with her empathic and telekinetic abilities is as well, but she had to take care of Bird Brain, or I would have sent her out with you too also. Naruto offered and Supergirl slowly nodded her head. You know a good deal about us and our abilities if you understood who to send out on a mission like that. She mused thoughtfully and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Not really, I know a basic list of abilities and powers for most of you based on the older heroes you guys mirror. Thus Kid Flash is fast, but he's not strong enough to move boulders. Batgirl isn't able to cover the kind of ground you can without a vehicle, nor is she as strong or fast. Starfire is a warrior by nature, but wouldn't be able to locate the civilians that were buried. Wonder Girl is the same as Star, and Pink X is more or less just your average thief. I had to be precise in my choices or something really bad could have happened out there. It's one of the many things you learn to deal with when you're a leader of a team. Naruto explained and Supergirl shivered slightly. If that's what you have to deal with when you're a leader, then you can have it. I'll stick to being a member of the League away from all the crap leaders have to deal with. She muttered and Naruto chuckled lightly to himself. Still, I wish Superman and the rest of the League wouldn't always treat me like a kid. Supergirl grumbled and Naruto rolled his eyes. My advice to you on that matter is to get used to it. The sooner you learn to stop caring about what others think about you, the sooner you'll find real happiness. Naruto offered smirkingly, and Supergirl huffed, while Batgirl gave them both looks. Hello, can we please focus? We've got a psycho with control of an entire city to beat, unless you'd rather Jump City become Ivy's personal garden. The older red-haired girl reminded and Supergirl grinned nervously before nodding her head. Sorry, just needed to say my piece. Supergirl offered while Cyborg finally finished working on his sonar. Alright gang, my sonar is up and running, we're clear for the next 40 or so feet. Cyborg offered and Naruto nodded his head before making his way down the sewers, followed by Cyborg and Raven, while Batgirl and Supergirl were behind them. So what were you talking to him about anyways? Batgirl questioned of her friend and Supergirl shrugged her shoulders. Nothing important, she offered and Batgirl shook her head with a smile. Come on Car, you can tell me. She offered and Supergirl looked at her with a slight grin across her face. I was just having a little chat about non-important stuff. She offered and Batgirl rolled her eyes. Right? And you couldn't do that with me, why? Batgirl challenged and Supergirl took a mock thoughtful expression. Well, for one, you're being all serious right now and he's easier to talk to in that department. Supergirl offered and Batgirl scoffed while crossing her arms over her chest with an annoyed frown. Alright, but we're kind of in a very bad situation, in case you hadn't noticed. Batgirl reminded and Supergirl nodded her head with a serious expression across her features. I know, but sometimes you need to lighten up, or the weight of the world will all coming falling down on top of you. Supergirl offered in retort and Batgirl blinked towards her friend in mild shock. That was very insightful, Car, she said and Supergirl smirked. Hey, I'm older and wiser than I look, though Clark never seems to notice. Kara offers then mutters under her breath, before flying off to keep up with Naruto and the others, Batgirl hanging back for a moment, to reflect on the platinum blonde girl's words, before following after them as well. Jump City. Alright, now what do we do? Kid Flash questioned, while looking to the Lex Corporation building apprehensively. The entire building was covered top to bottom in vines, spore pods, barb shooters, and every other kind of plant imaginable. A mist of poison gas surrounded it on the street with 4 massive fly traps guarding it. I'm thinking. Nightwing replied while trying to figure out a point of entry that wouldn't kill them as well. Obviously, given the very near psychotic level of security, Ivy wasn't taking any chances this time. Well, think faster, we can't just stand here all night, or we'll eventually get spotted. Kid Flash stated while tapping one foot with a frown. Truth be told, he just really didn't like holding still for too long, it kind of bored him to tears. Please be patient, new friend, Robin needs the silence in order to concentrate. Starfire pleaded while Wonder Girl looked over the defenses of the building with a thin frown across her face. While not a natural-born leader like Nightwing, she was an Amazon, a warrior born and bred for combat. This was her element, not Nightwing's. His was protecting a city, and while she could do so as well, her true element and very nature was in combat. If we had some kind of distraction, we could fly over to that ledge right there. Wonder Girl pointed out and Nightwing looked at Donna before nodding his head. Donna's right, that looks like it's the only way we'll be able to get in undetected. Knight replied and Beast Boy decided to put in his own 2 cents. But dude, where are we going to find a distraction big enough to draw the attention of all those plants? Beast Boy questioned and his companions gave him a look before all 5 stopped when they heard a sound. Is that buzzing? Beast Boy asked with one ear upwards, and Knight nodded his head. I know that sound. Starfire whispered thoughtfully and Wonder Girl frowned. It sounds like an insect's wings, lots of them. The Amazonian girl thought aloud and Nightwing nodded his head in agreement. Yeah, like the wings of millions of mutated moths. Kid Flash mused aloud, and Nightwing blinked. That was an oddly accurate example. He noted and Kid Flash pointed to the side with a flat expression. What example? There's really millions of mutated moths over there. The teen stated and the others quickly looked to where he was pointing, Beast Boy and Nightwing gaping, while Starfire gasped. It is the killer moth. Starfire exclaimed as the said Mothman flew closer and closer to the Lex Corporation building. Attack! He exclaimed while throwing a clawed hand forward, his mutant moth army quickly flying past him and attacking the mutant vines around the massive building. Several of the vines began to lash out, the giant mutant moths dodging them before starting to munch on the vines. Shaking and lashing out, the vines tried to throw off the creatures, yet it proved futile for them. Dodging and weaving around the flailing vines, Killer Moth himself suddenly dive-bombed the building. Charge! He exclaimed while the rest of his moth army followed him, flying straight at the building. Killer Moth then pulled up at the last second, with a few of his moths following him. As they flew upwards, the other moths started to attack the fly traps below, the mutant creatures easily being smart enough not to get into the mouths of the plants. As the moths were doing this, Killer Moth slammed a fist into a nearby dryad as it got too close to him, while he was flying up the side of the building. Leave none alive. Devour every plant that you see. Killer Moth exclaimed to his army as a few moths broke off from behind him and flew towards the sides, each one heading straight for more dryads. Narrowing his compound eyes as he flew upwards, Killer Moth suddenly jerked to the side to evade a vine as it grew out of the side of the building. Keeping on course, Killer Moth continued flying upwards until finally stopping and slamming his fists into the solid concrete of the building, soon breaking through and then flying into the building, as his moth army continued to face off against the numerous plants. Dude. For some weird old guy that lives in his basement, not to mention is pushed around by his teenage daughter, he's seriously tough. Beast Boy stated in shock, and Nightwing nodded his head in agreement as he watched the mutated man successfully lay siege to the Lex Corporation building. And with only the help of an army of genetically altered insects no less. That a big enough distraction for you? Kid Flash questioned, while still staring at the spectacle in Nightwing's side, while rubbing his face. First Ivy and Harley, now Killer Moth as well. It's a who's who of Gotham villains around here. Not to mention we've got at the very least a dozen of our normal rogues helping us with this problem. Ugh, what a day. Nightwing muttered before shaking his head with a frown. Alright team, let's move out while we still have a chance. Knight ordered before quickly jumping off the side of the building, a pair of wings opening up as he spread his arms, and then started to glide towards the ledge Wonder Girl had seen. You heard the man. Wonder Girl stated with an amused smirk while grabbing Kid Flash and carrying him as she flew off, Starfire flying next to her, while Beast Boy turned into a pterodactyl to keep up with the rest of them. As they were infiltrating the building, Killer Moth landed inside and looked around, eyes narrowing. I know you're here, Ivy, you can't hide from me. KM stated darkly while looking all around himself. Killer Moth. Is that you? A familiar bouncy voice questioned as Harley looked down at the Mothman from the ledge. What the hell happened to you? Last time I checked you were just some guy in a silly purple costume with a lame as hell silk spitter gun and delusions of grandeur. Harley noted while tilting her head to one side, and Killer Moth scowled deeply. Things and people change, Harley, most of us do at least. He stated, and Harley shrugged her shoulders disinterestedly. I like how I am just fine, don't really got an interest in slicing my lips open like Mr. Che. Harley stated and then took a faraway look as she sighed. Oh Puddin, I wonder how you're doing without your Harley to help you. The psychotic blonde wondered aloud, and Killer Moth mentally groaned. He's probably the happiest man alive right now. Killer Moth thought to himself with a thin frown. Even given her great beauty, flexibility, and loyalty, Harley was the single most annoying woman he'd ever had the misfortune of meeting. That's nice and all, Harley, but where's Ivy? I'm stopping this madness before it gets any more out of hand. Killer Moth states simply, and Harley looks at the Mothman with a confused stare. Why don't you remember Da rules, Mothman? When one of da big cats goes after something, you second strings stay out of da way. Harley said while trying to remind Killer Moth of an unwritten rule back in Gotham. In case you've forgotten, Harley, this isn't Gotham, this is my city. Not the Joker's, not Ivy's, and certainly not yours. Killer Moth stated, in Harley's side, while flipping up to sit on the ledge, both hands folded under her chin. Boy, when did you grow a backbone, Mothman? She then asked with a tilted head, and Killer Moth gritted his teeth in fury, Harley suddenly noticing it wasn't a mask he was wearing. Seriously though, what's with the way you look now? I feel like I'm watching a rerun of that Mothman movie. What was it called again? Harley questioned, then wondered quietly, and Killer Moth let out a low, almost clicking sound, as he started to rise up into the air with his wings. Ivy's not the only one with genetic mutations to help her, you know. Killer Moth stated before lunging forward and ramming into Harley, knocking her back through a curtain with Killer following after her. Landing on the ground, Killer's eyes bolted open as a vine suddenly slammed into him, knocking him back, and into a wall. Grunting, Killer Moth looked up, and gritted his teeth when he saw Ivy, sitting on a throne made up of numerous different vines. So he's the one who's had all those annoying moths attack my babies. Ivy noted, and Killer Moth narrowed his eyes dangerously. And you're the goddamn plant bitch whose stupid babies are endangering my little girl. Killer growled out angrily, Ivy blinking in surprise, while Harley sat up and gaped towards the Mothman. You have a daughter, she demanded loudly, and Killer Moth merely clicked for a moment while glaring at Ivy. Wow, who knew you was the family man type? Harley wondered aloud, and Killer Moth twitched while crouching low, his claws extending slightly as he did so. Would you shut the hell up already? Killer Moth demanded, and Ivy scowled towards Killer Moth, a vine launching at him from the side. You shouldn't talk to Harley like that, she stated, and Killer Moth merely flipped over the vine, then grabbed it with both arms, before ripping it out of the wall with his bare hands, then threw it to the side, as he continued to make a low clicking sound. Whoa, someone got an upgrade. Harley murmured to herself while flipping onto her feet and then stretched out a bit. Seriously, do you honestly think you can take us both on alone when those 5 Titan kids couldn't take us together? Harley questioned, and Killer Moth clicked somewhat louder, Harley figuring it was the equivalent to a growl for the Bugman. I don't have to stop you, just keep you busy while my army devours Ivy's plants. Killer stated, and Ivy growled towards the insect-like man. Harley, please show Killer Moth the exit. Ivy questioned, and Harley grinned, then rushed over to Ivy and pulled out her duffel bag from behind the plant woman's throne. Pulling her sledgehammer from the bag and leaning it into her shoulder, Killer Moth looked at her with a blank expression. Didn't you used to use a big-ass mallet? He questioned, and Harley snickered into one hand before grinning towards the Mothman. Get with the times, all sport. It's like you said. Harley started to say in her normal chipper voice, then narrowed her eyes dangerously with a monstrous grin. Things change. She echoed and then flipped forward, still holding onto the sledgehammer before slamming it into Killer Moth's midriff, sending him flying back into a wall. Now this is a real fly swatter. Harley stated while holding her sledgehammer up, Killer Moth groaning as he pushed himself back to his feet. Now I remember why we second-string villains never took the heavy hitters on. Killer Moth mumbled before shaking his head, the clicking noise returning as he then reached to his side and lifted a boulder over his head, Harley blinking. Wow, I'll give you one thing, Mothman, you're certainly a hell of a lot stronger than you used to be. Harley noted before yelping, and ducking out of the way of the boulder as Killer Moth cracked his neck then lunged forward. Placing her legs under Killer Moth to hold him back, Harley then jammed her sledgehammer's handle into his mouth and pushed the Mothman back and off of her. Ha! You steel bug for brains. Harley stated, and an odd look crossed Killer Moth's features before he literally chomped down on the handle of Harley's sledgehammer, easily taking a bite out of it. You were saying Quinn, Killer Moth demanded, and Harley looked at her sledgehammer and then the mutant Mothman. I'm in trouble, aren't I? She questioned while Killer Moth merely clicked lightly again then lunged at her with his jaws opened wide. Sores. Naruto turned to look out from behind a corner, frowning when he saw dozens of spore pods in the next room. Unlike the rest of the rooms before it, Cyborg's sonar hadn't been able to spot the plants within the room. This was more than likely due to the fact the pods were only growing out of the roof of the room, leaving the floor untouched. Shit, now we'll need another detour, this is really getting annoying. The blonde-haired ex-shinobi thought to himself before pulling back slightly when one of the pods started to twitch. Raising a brow, Naruto watched a pale green-skinned hand burst out of the pot, as another dryad pulled itself out of the pot before it fell to the ground. However, unlike the last batch, her skin was smooth with no visible differences between the leaves that made up her skin. The vines that made up her hair were also thinner, appearing somewhat like dozens of braids all falling down to her shoulders. Twitching and stumbling, the dryad pushed itself up, then looked to its hands as its fingers formed sharp claws. Ainz then reached up and stated, wrapping over it in the same pattern as the ones over Ivy's body, even forming into a pair of panties. Bark then grew over it like armor, and thorns grew out to finish off the appearance of the dryad, as it was then pulled up through the roof and into the unknown. So? Raven questioned, and Naruto sighed while turning to the team he was working with for the moment. This way's a no-go, if we don't want Ivy to notice us, not to mention the spore pods double as dryad birth pods now, we need another detour, Cyborg. Naruto explained, and Cyborg grunted, while checking his sonar once more. Alright, we got one other path we can take without any of Ivy's plans to bug us. Follow me. Cyborg stated before waving for the others to follow him as he walked down a hall while looking at his sonar, the others following behind him. Journeying down the sewers, the 5 teens soon came to another open area, and Naruto looked around. The room was about the size of a small football field, with the walls appearing to have been dug out for more room. Water had pooled in the room, and was falling down open holes like whirlpools here and there. Looks like the coast is clear, he stated, and Cyborg grinned as they walked into a massive circular room, the walls appearing to have been dug out by something. What did all this? Supergirl wondered, and Batgirl knelt down when her foot touched something. Reaching into the water with a grimace, Batgirl then pulled the object out, then yelped when she saw it was a human skull. I really don't want to know, the redhead stated, and Raven narrowed her eyes, then formed black energy in her hand, and lifted several objects out of the water, her eyes whitening to see dozens of skulls and other bones had littered the bottom of the pool. Now wide-eyed, Raven threw all the bones into a pile to the side, her right eye twitching slightly as she got closer to Naruto. Shit, this is bad, Naruto murmured before looking over to a very green Cyborg, and mentally rolled his eyes. Why is it that these kids can't take a few bones? It's not like people don't die every day. Naruto wondered to himself before shaking his head and reminding himself that the kids hadn't had to deal with never being able to save someone before. Cyborg, you sure nothing's down here? Naruto asked the teen, and Cyborg shook his head and started to check his sonar again, only to stop when slime fell down on him, and he slowly looked up with the others. Eyes widening, the teens all saw a massive plant creature wrapped around the entirety of the ceiling like a long coiled up snake. Its body was green like the other plants, only with dozens of thorns poking out along its wooden spine. Its skin, unlike with the other plants, appeared much rougher, with vines twining and coiling beneath it like muscle. Its 3 glowing green eyes were half closed, and its mouth was made up of 4 separate petal-like parts with rows of teeth along the edges of each, and finally its tail was tipped with a spiked protrusion of some kind, with dozens of sharp needles like a cactus. Ah shit. And I hated giant snakes enough to begin with. Naruto mumbled while the giant snake hissed while slithering down the side of the walls, numerous vines coiling off of its form from behind, and attaching to the dirt to take full root. Hissing, the thing then surrounded them, blocking the exits while Naruto crouched, and the others got ready to attack. Talk about your garden snakes. Cyborg muttered, and Naruto smirked slightly, before pulling his 2 ninjutsu from his back, and flipped them in a reverse grip. So Tin Man, any ideas for this sucker? Naruto asked, and before Cyborg could answer, Supergirl cracked her knuckles. Just leave this to me, she stated, and then flew off as Naruto tried to stop her. Shit, what the hell does she think she's doing? Naruto demanded with wide eyes, and Batgirl pinched the bridge of her nose. Proving the league was right for one, they treat her like a kid because she does stupid stuff like this. Batgirl stated while Supergirl flew towards the massive plant snake, only to curse as it opened its mouth, dozens of barbs flying towards her. Batting the thorns away easily, Supergirl then slammed her fists into the plant's head, knocking it to the ground, only to yelp as its tail came from behind and whipped her away. Once Supergirl hit the ground away from the others, places along the snake's body peeled back to reveal more barbed shooters that now surrounded them. Shit. Raven, shield. Naruto said quickly, and Raven instantly did as told when hundreds of barbs came flying at them from all around. Soon the barbs abated and Naruto grit his teeth with narrowed eyes. We need to deal with the barb shooters first and foremost, after that we deal with the main body of the snake. Naruto ordered as the shield came down and then mentally groaned. I'm going to kick myself for saying this later, but Titans, go. Naruto ordered as he lunged towards the snake's sides, while the others went to separate sides of the massive snake. Frowning as she got back up, Supergirl looked at the snake as it hissed towards her and cracked her knuckles. I really hate weeds. She mumbled before slapping her face. Duh, heat vision. She muttered before firing the beams of heat towards the snake, only for the snake to lunge out of the way as the beam hit the wall near it. This caused some of the roof to fall down where Naruto was, the ex-shinobi cursing as he flipped back from the rocks, before turning to glare at Supergirl. Oops. Supergirl muttered with a shrug, while Naruto turned back to his job and twisted on his heel, sending a blade of wind out to slice several of the barb spitters. As he was doing that, Batgirl threw several ice capsules at those she was dealing with, freezing them and then throwing batarangs to shatter them completely. Cyber took his favorite route as he fired his sonic cannon at the plants, tearing them apart instantly. Raven used a much easier method of getting rid of them, by forming her normal black energy over, and then ripping the barb shooters out of the snake. Hissing out in pain, the snake suddenly moved, coiling around the room quickly, before ending up in a reverse position it had been in, more slots opening along its sides to reveal more barb shooters. Shit. Naruto muttered before teleporting to Batgirl as Raven went to Cyborg and formed a shield. The barb shooters then began to fire onto the teens, Naruto swinging and spinning his swords, while ducking and moving around Batgirl, to keep the barbs away from both of them, while Raven held up her shield. Supergirl merely batted the barbs away, while the snake hissed towards them. Once the barbs had abated once more, Naruto lunged at the next few barb shooters, with the others doing likewise, while Supergirl flew towards the head of the snake once more. Smirking to herself, as she got closer to the snake she yelped when it opened its mouth, and dozens of twining vines wrapped around her. Damn it, why can't these things just die? Supergirl demanded while taking hold of several of the vines and yanking on them, pulling the snake with her. Turning towards this, Naruto grinned to himself as he saw something unusual on the snake, a large hole near the base of its neck, where 5 vines were coiling into the ground. Hell, I think she actually did something intelligent. Naruto noted before swinging his sword and severing a few of the vines, the snake hissing in pain as it thrashed for a moment. Crying out as the snake thrashed, Supergirl held firm as she held the snake in place, only for it to bite down and sever the vines, causing her to spin backwards. Hissing angrily, the plant then retracted its vines and dug into the side of the walls, soon vanishing. Well, that was easy. Cyborg noted with a blink, and Naruto frowned darkly. I don't think it's over yet, he said flatly, then cursed as the snake suddenly came down at them from the roof, with its tail placed into the ground to act as its roots. Shit, I hate it when I'm right, Naruto exclaimed as the snake then unleashed a cloud of poison from its mouth. Oh man, why us? Naruto wondered aloud, before spinning one of his blades, causing the poison to flow towards him, before he then twisted on one heel, and threw the poison to one side. Nice. Cyborg offered as he looked to the teen, and Naruto frowned. Yeah, now how do we deal with this freaking monster? Naruto questioned as the girls made their way over to them and looked up at the snake, as it started to convulse and spasm yet again. What next? Raven wondered before the creature spit out several things that bore a disturbing resemblance to plant bulbs. Bulbs? Okay, that's new, Naruto noted for a moment, then cursed when the bulbs sprouted vines that shot at the snake, attaching to it while they then developed more vines, these thicker with sharp thorns on them, and round cactus-like balls at the very tips of the vines. 10 to 1, those are extremely poisonous, Cyborg noted flatly, while pointing towards the plant creature, and Naruto growled in his throat. Is there anything these fucking plants can't adapt to? Naruto demanded angrily, and Batgirl rolled her eyes. Less complaining, we need to focus, she reminded, and Naruto crouched down. Supergirl, try and deal with the snake, we'll handle these bulbs, Naruto ordered, and Supergirl grinned as she flew towards the snake, Raven smirking slightly. You did that to get her out of the way, didn't you? She questioned, and Naruto merely rolled his eyes as he lunged forward and dodged around the many poison-tipped vines of the bulbs. She's more liability down here than anything else, Card-chan. She's strong, fast, and tough, but when she's in a group she has to realize the rest of us do have limits, and that we can be crushed and killed if she's not careful. She's going to get us all killed with the way she's fighting the crazy snake, Naruto replied while flipping over a bulb and severed its vine while coming down in a crouch and flipping to the side to evade a swing from one of the other bulbs. Sounds like she reminds you of yourself. Raven noted as she formed a shield to block a bulb, and then ripped it from the snake, before tossing it over her shoulder as it started to wilt. Maybe just a little, the blue-eyed blonde-haired thing doesn't help the comparison any either. But all that means is I know how to deal with her better than the league, say she's too young or not experienced enough, and she'll just barrel in headlong anyways. Trick her into thinking she's helping and she won't get in the way. Naruto noted, then explained while ducking under another vine and swinging his ninjutsu up to sever it from the bulb. Nearby, Batgirl was ducking and rolling away from several vines before throwing a few batarangs, taking out 3 of the bulbs instantly, while Cyborg grabbed 2 of them by their vines, and then ripped them from the snake. Above them, Supergirl was flying around the snake, dodging its snapping jaws before slamming into his head and grabbing it by its mouth. Alright ugly, time for you to get down. Supergirl growled out while pulling the snake out from the wall, and Naruto jumped onto his back and swung his swords at its head, the snake crying out in pain as its head split open to show a glowing green core of some kind. That's like the core the pods have. If we take that out, the snake is toast. Batgirl exclaimed while Naruto was thrown from the back of the snake when it pulled back into the roof, Supergirl grabbing him out of midair. Put me down. Naruto ordered flatly, and Supergirl shrugged with a smirk as she flew back to the ground, and Naruto rolled out of her arms and into a low crouch. Alright, where is it coming from this time? Cyborg wondered while looking around, then cursed as it came out of the ground before them, hissing and snarling viciously. Well, that answers that. Raven mused flatly, and Naruto snorted. Honestly, how was the girl always so funny? Yeah, unfortunately for us it looks more than a little pissed now. Naruto added as an afterthought as the snake started to convulse and spasm once more. Oh, what new hell is this? He wondered aloud as the snake started to cough up dozens of the poison spores of the pods they normally dealt with into the air. Oh hell. Cyborg muttered while Supergirl gaped. That could be a problem. She noted and then cursed as the snake started to spew poison all around its form, forcing the teens to back up. The spores then started to shoot towards them, the group ducking and evading them as the poison started to spread. Man, if we don't stop this thing soon, we're going to be in some serious trouble. Cyborg exclaimed while Naruto nodded his head and then narrowed his eyes on the poison. Supergirl, use your super breath and push the poison away. Naruto shouted, and Supergirl nodded her head before taking a deep breath and blowing, sending the poison the opposite direction and back into the sewers. Seeing the snake hiss before starting to convulse, Naruto narrowed his eyes, then teleported above the snake. Alright ugly, this ends now. Naruto shouted as he sheathed his swords and then fell into the mouth of the snake. Dodging and weaving around the spores in the snake, Naruto grinned when he finally spotted the core of the creature. 1000 blades jutsu. He exclaimed as the thousands of blades suddenly started to spin around him, tearing the snake apart from the inside out as it cried out and thrashed before starting to wilt. Naruto then teleported out of the snake as it fell to the ground, green goop seeping out of it. Landing in a low crouch, Naruto gave off a few panting breaths while staring at the snake. I really hate giant snakes. He grumbled aloud with a hand to his head, and Raven floated over to him. Yeah, and how many times have they eaten you by now? She quipped, and Naruto grunted, seeing an amused smirk grace her features. I shouldn't have told you that story. He muttered while standing up and then looked around as Batgirl looked over the dead plant snake. Alright, this is new even for Ivy. She finally stated, and Cyborg frowned. The creatures are getting more and more complex, right? Chances are this is just a tougher version of the flight traps we have to deal with. Cyborg noted, and Batgirl slowly nodded her head, seeing as that was very likely. Either that or the pods. Naruto reminded with a shrug, and Gotham's Dark Angel nodded her head to that as well, since it had a core like a pod. I don't care either way, it's dead already, so let's just hurry up and stop Ivy. Supergirl stated, and Naruto rolled his eyes before motioning for Cyborg to lead. The titanium teen nodded his head before checking his sonar and grinned. Alright gang, we're really close, so let's hurry up and move out. Cyborg stated while running off, followed by the rest of the group, though Naruto rubbed his chin as he looked at the snake for a moment longer. If they're all becoming more complex, what happens when we dump that poison on them? He wondered to himself, then shook his head as he rushed to catch up with the rest of his group. With Harley and Ivy. Harley yelped while evading Killer Moth's claws as the mad mutant Mothman came at her with clear fury. Guy goes away for a decade or so, and is suddenly able to beat the hell out of me. How does that make any sense? Harley wondered to herself as Killer Moth opened his wings and flew into the air, ripping a chunk of the roof out before throwing it at the psychotic blonde. Flipping and twirling out of the way, Harley looked to see Ivy was grimacing in pain, though chose to ignore it as she tried to deal with their little moth problem. I'll give Mothman one thing, he's really got guts to take us both on, no brains, but some real guts. Harley noted as Killer Moth cried out angrily and flew straight towards her, making a crunching sound before spotting out a bit of silk that wrapped around the girl's legs. What the hell? Harley demanded before yelping as Killer Moth grabbed her with an evil grin across his face. Lame silk spitter, huh? He reminded with a twitch, and Harley chuckled nervously while staring at Killer Moth's very sharp teeth. Come on Mothman, can't you take a joke? Harley asked meekly, and Killer Moth narrowed his compound eyes on her. All things considered, he didn't think that would work. His old silk spitter gun had long since been taken by Batman for his little collection. Adding the genetic mutation to spit silk out himself had just been for old time's sakes. He never thought of using it in actual combat like that before. No, not really. Killer Moth stated, and Harley grinned nervously before kicking both legs upwards into Killer Moth's chin and landing on the ground. Cripes, you're stupid. Don't you know not to give your enemy a chance to retaliate? Harley questioned while pulling a knife out of somewhere, and started to cut the silk away from her legs. An angry clicking was her only response as Killer Moth narrowed his eyes on the blonde, and then grinned evilly as he crunched down once more, and spit several gobs of silk out. These wrapped around Harley's hands before he then lunged forward and grabbed her, carrying her up to the ceiling. He spit out another gob, and stuck the girl to it, before spitting out more around her body, trapping her in a cocoon that only left her head free. Why don't you stick around? I'll hang with you later, Harl. Killer Moth quipped, and Harley blinked before suddenly bursting out with laughter. Oh, that's a good one, Mothman. I thought you didn't like jokes. Harley exclaimed, then demanded, while Killer Moth floated back to the ground, where Ivy was looking at him with one eye open. Alright Ivy, show's over, call off your plants now. Killer Moth stated with a low click, and Ivy raised a brow before holding a hand forward. Wah. Killer Moth wondered before cursing as dozens of vines shot out of the ground and wrapped around his body tightly, the Mothman clicking angrily as he felt the thorns pierce his flesh. God, am I happy I made that serum that made me immune to poisons and toxins. Killer Moth thought to himself while struggling with the vines wrapping around his form, and Ivy smirked towards the mutant Mothman. Sorry, but I don't follow orders, I give them. Ivy stated before pointing down, the vines dragging Killer Moth down as he struggled with their grip. As he cried out and nearly disappeared into the ground, a green T-Rex suddenly bit the vines, and started yanking them up, careful of not touching the thorns. I don't think so, Ivy. Nightwing stated as he and his team entered the room, Starfire pulling Killer Moth free and gasping when she saw him bleeding. You're injured, she said in shock, and Killer Moth grunted while Beast Boy released the vines and rushed over to the man. I'm fine, I heal quickly and I'm immune to poison. He grumbled while Ivy frowned towards the Titans and then crossed her arms. Robin, nice to see you again. Ivy offered sarcastically, and Harley blinked before grinning. Hi Captain Tweet Tweet. I just love the new outfit. Harley shouted with a wide grin, and Kid Flash snorted as he tried not to laugh, while Night twitched angrily. Smirking lightly, Ivy then snapped her fingers as several dryads popped out of the ground and looked towards the Titans darkly. Those are new. Killer Moth noted, while the Titans got ready for a fight, Nightwing pulling out two new bird earrings, and slamming them together to form a broadsword that he held at his side. Titans, go! He exclaimed while lunging at the dryads, followed by Starfire and Wonder Girl as Kid Flash zipped forward and kicked one of the dryads, sending her flying back and snapping the vine she was connected to. As they did this, Beast Boy helped Killer Moth over to a secluded spot to rest, while the Mothman healed. Dude, what were you thinking jumping in here after Ivy and Harley like that? You could have been seriously hurt. The green teen stated, and Killer Moth grunted once more while ducking as a dryad came their way. I was thinking of kidding. I lived in Gotham for years. Before I came here, I know how Harley and Ivy fight, and I know how they think. Unfortunately, Ivy beating me was assured, but I did manage to get Harley at the least. Killer Moth explained, then reminded as they both looked up only to grimace, as a few dryads started to come out of the roof and cut Harley free. Well shit. Killer Moth grumbled as Harley was freed and fell to the ground, a vine from the side catching her. Woohoo. Let's do that again. Harley cheered, and Ivy rolled her eyes before giving the girl her duffel bag. Focus, Harl, we have intruders trying to spoil all our fun. Ivy reminded, and Harley nodded her head. Right, focus, this is me, focus. She stated, and then reached into her bag, and pulled out what appeared to be a bomb with Joker's face on it. Yo. Wonder Brat, heads up. She shouted, and Wonder Girl blinked while turning to the villainess, then cursed as she flew out of the way of the bomb before it exploded. Watching this, Harley laughed to herself while holding her sides, clearly amused by the look on Wonder Girl's face. Rolling her eyes and turning back to the battle at hand, Ivy held her hands to the sides and pulled inwards, several vines, pods, and shooters coming out of the walls to aid the dryads. Running around the room, Kid Flash cursed as he dodged and weaved around the flailing vines, only to yelp as one of the dryads kicked his feet out from under him, sending him skidding forward as a shooter fired several barbs towards him. Wonder Girl quickly rushed to her friend's aid, blocking the barbs with her bracelets, and then grabbing a chunk of rock that she threw at them, crushing them all. Turning to Kid Flash with a smirk, Wonder Girl held a hand towards the redhead. Need a hand? She quipped, and Kid Flash grinned nervously. Well, looks like I owe you one. He offered, then pushed Wonder Girl down as a spore nearly slammed into them both. Actually, I think we're even. Wonder Girl stated simply, and Kid Flash nodded his head in agreement. Flying and dodging around the vines, Starfire started to hurl her starbolts at the pods, destroying them quickly, while Nightwing frowned as he dealt with the dryads. Ducking into a low kick, he knocked a few off their feet and quickly severed the vines from them, causing them to wilt and die as he looked around to see more crawling up out of the ground. They never end. He muttered before reaching to his belt and placed a mask over his face, a screen rising over his eyes, 2 extra plates locking over his ears, as poison gas started to rise up out of the ground. Titans, get to higher ground. The teen exclaimed while firing a grapple to the roof, and Wonder Girl lifted Kid Flash. Dude, you think you can fly? Beast Boy asked, and Killer Moth opened his wings before picking up the green teen and flying upwards to a ledge before groaning. Yeah, just smack Ivy around a few times for me, would you? Killer Moth asked, and Beast Boy blinked. Dude, you're being nice to me? He asked, and Killer Moth rolled his eyes. You're dating Kitten? He reminded, and Beast Boy chuckled nervously. One thing though, I like you more than her other boyfriends, but if you somehow manage to break her heart, you'll wish I wasn't from Gotham. Killer Moth stated darkly as the ominous clicking returned, and Beast Boy nodded, looking several shades paler than normal. Right? He said meekly while turning around and saw Nightwing land on a nearby ledge as Starfire and the others rushed over to them. Friend Beast Boy, are you and the Killer Moth of the O&K? Starfire asked, and Killer Moth scratched his head for a moment. What the hell did she just ask us? The Mothman asked, and Beast Boy grinned before turning to Starfire. Yeah, we're fine, Star. Killer Moth here is just a little banged up. Beast Boy offered, and Nightwing frowned before looking to the mutant Mothman. Speaking of which, what are you even doing here? Nightwing questioned, and Killer Moth gave the teen a flat look. You think I want these 2 psychos here? I moved to Jump City to get away from nutcases like them to raise Kitten in a safe environment. Killer Moth stated, and Nightwing blinked for a moment. But you're one of those psychos, and you've tried to do something like this before. He reminded, and Killer Moth muttered something under his breath. Yeah, but I know I won't kill Kitten unlike them. The Mothman reminded, and Night gave him that before turning as the Dryads started to crawl up the walls, and the vines rose up out of the poison. This is so not good. Kid Flash noted, and Nightwing nodded his head. Dude, if X was here he could go all tornado and blow the wind away. Or if Raven was here she could do her magic watsa to get rid of it, or even if Supergirl was. Beast Boy started to rant, and Killer Moth twitched before slapping a hand over the green teen's mouth. Word of advice, kid, stop talking. Killer Moth grumbled out, and Night smirked slightly before turning back to the oncoming plants. Only for a burst of wind to come from a nearby hole and blow them back into the poison, as Naruto kicked a few rocks out of his way as his team entered into the room. What the hell, what have you guys been doing up here, kid? Learning a new way to get your asses handed to you? Naruto questioned seriously, and Nightwing gave him an annoyed look mirrored by Kid Flash and Wonder Girl. Shut up. All 3 stated, and Supergirl flew past the thief before blowing the poison out a few windows, Ivy frowning while Harley gasped. Oh hell, is Super Babe what next? Harley wondered aloud while Naruto jumped to the ground, followed by both his team and Nightwing's. Skullface, what are you doing here? Harley asked, and Naruto gave the blonde-haired clown a flat look. I told you to not to destroy my town, remember? He exclaimed, and Harley blinked, then took a thoughtful expression before chuckling nervously. Oops, I kind of forgot, I was having too much fun, you know. Harley admitted, and Naruto slapped his face while muttering under his breath. This goes to show Harl, can't trust anyone these days. Ivy mused, and Harley gave her a look. Technically Red, we broke his trust. Harley reminded, and Ivy blinked, then shrugged her shoulders. Semantics. She replied while Naruto pulled his swords from his back and narrowed his eyes on the 2. You girls really don't have any idea who you've pissed off, do you? Naruto asked with a raised brow, and Ivy leaned forward with a smirk. Another guy in a costume with a lot of toys, what's to know? Ivy replied, and Naruto narrowed his eyes, Harley looking to Ivy nervously. Red. She started to say, only for lightning, to spark along Naruto's arms. Actually no, I'm not. Naruto growled out as the lenses of his mask started to glow blood red, Raven whitening her eyes as wind spiraled with the lightning over his arms. So allow me to show you exactly who you've pissed off. Naruto finished in a low demonic tone as he then brought his hands together and sent a burst of both wind and lightning shooting towards Harley and Ivy. Elsewhere, Gizmo breathed a sigh of relief as he finally put the finishing touches on the poison to take down the plants around the city. Now to talk to Temp and see where he is. Gizmo muttered while trying to call his leader, only getting static when he did so. Blinking and looking at his communicator for a moment, Gizmo growled, before grabbing a different one. Looks like I have to call Batbub. He muttered to himself, while calling the redhead with the device that had come from Batman's belt, and he wanted to save it to crank call Batman too. Hello? I'm kind of busy here, Batman. Batgirl said while Gizmo heard the sounds of thunder and static, 2 very familiar screams, and what sounded like a wild animal tearing the place apart. This ain't Bat breath. I'm Gizmo and I can't get in contact with my leader Red X. Gizmo stated and waited for a reply as he tapped a pen against one of the 3 canisters of his poison. How the hell are you talking to me? Batgirl demanded, and Gizmo muttered under his breath before replying. Thank X. He swiped Bat Breath's tech, and the communicator was among it. I was actually saving it to make crank calls to the back of or something, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Gizmo replied simply while inwardly calculating how they would have to go over the city to hit all the plants. Crank calls, what are you, 5? That girl demanded, and Gizmo gritted his teeth and mentally twitched. No snot for brains. Now shut up and tell me why X isn't picking up. Gizmo stated, then demanded as he rubbed his temples only to frown when he heard a very loud explosion. He's busy throwing bolts of lightning at Harley and Ivy. That girl replied, and Gizmo blinked before shaking his head. Great, he's pissed off. Alright, well, we're going to be dousing the city with the plant killer. Smell you later, pit sniffer. Gizmo replied while turning off the connection and frowning heavily before taking his own communicator back up. Yo, Blackfire and Ray, report to the lab. I'm going to need you two for this. Gizmo stated, and the two appeared through the roof a few moments later, both panting heavily. Getting rough out there? Gizmo asked with his head tilted, and Donnie grit her teeth. What's it look like, asswipe? She demanded, and Gizmo rolled his eyes before pointing to 3 cylinders before him. Look, I don't have all night to explain how I made these or how vital it is that we get every plant. All I'm going to say is that, Donnie, you take the east side, Blackfire, the west side, and I'll handle everything in between. The green button will release the poison and keep releasing it when you're within the city limits. Gizmo explained flatly while Donnie and Blackfire looked to one another, then nodded their heads to Gizmo. Alright then, let's move out, girls, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, we've got a city to save. Gizmo stated, then shivered in distaste as he strapped the device to himself, then activated his jets. Pressing another button while pulling his goggles down, Gizmo flew out of the base through a long tube, followed closely by Blackfire and Donnie. Back with the Titans. The Lex Corporation building had seen much better days. Harley was certain her life had flashed before her eyes more in the past few minutes than should be possible. Ivy was beside her, some of her leaves charred from the electrical current that Naruto seemed to generate now. Red, you seriously need to apologize to Skullface. Harley stated, and Ivy gave the clown girl a flat look as her response. I only did what any villain would do, Harl, even you. She reminded curtly, and Harley yelped while pulling her friend behind a boulder. Listen, Red, unless you want to be cooked vegetables, I suggest you swallow your pride and apologize already. The girl proclaimed, and Ivy frowned before shaking her head, Harley crying comical tears as she grabbed Ivy's shoulders. Why, Red? She demanded pleadingly, and Ivy rolled her eyes before crossing her arms and looking to the nails of her left hand. Because he shouldn't have trusted a villainess like me in the first place. She replied, and both heard an odd sizzling sound, thus looked up to see the red-eyed Naruto. Harley couldn't help it as she whimpered lowly as the crimson-red orbs narrowed onto them both dangerously. Thanks, I'll remember that for future reference. Naruto growled while calling forth his chakra into his hands, molding it into both wind and lightning, before hurling the orbs at Harley and Ivy, the blonde clown pulling her friend out of the way. Would you hold fucking still already? Naruto demanded while throwing more bolts of lightning towards the girl, Harley giving him an incredulous expression. What do you think I am, crazy? She demanded, and Naruto gave her a flat expression. Yeah. He admitted, and Harley blinked and then shrugged her shoulders. True, but I'm not that crazy. Harley retorted before yelping and running as the furious blonde came at them once more. If one looked around, they might notice the distinct lack of one, Color Moth, who had actually escaped during the insanity caused by Naruto and the many plants around the building. Said Mothman was actually scaling the side of the building, using the insanity inside to get at Ivy's mister, while she was distracted. More like fighting for her life. That kid is like Batman with demonic powers right now. Killer Moth thought to himself before shivering at the thought of such a thing. Looking to either side and seeing streams of energy followed by an odd mist, Killer Moth grinned as he figured someone had thought to make a plant killer. Blinking as he wondered why he hadn't thought of it himself, the Mothman pulled himself to the top of the building, and then grinned when he saw the mister, strapped to the side of it. Finally, now to finally end this nightmare. He muttered to himself while walking over to the mister. However, he then stopped and looked around, half expecting something to pop up. Shrugging, the Mothman walked over to the mister, and then reared a fist back before slamming it into the device. The mister sparked wildly for a few moments before sizzling out, the green mist stopping as he did. Blinking, Killer Moth looked around once more before scratching his head when nothing came out and attacked him this time either. Nothing's happening. He wondered while feeling almost cheated in a way, and then decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth. Opening his wings, the mutated Mothman flew into the air, leaving the Titans and his Moth army to deal with the remaining plants around the building. Meanwhile, back inside, Starfire flew out of the way of another vine, then yelped as a stray bolt of lightning very nearly got her from the side. I believe the Red X is most displeased. Starfire thought to herself while then ducking towards the ground and picking Beast Boy up before a Dryad got him from behind. Dude. X has gone totally mental. Beast Boy exclaimed while Starfire mentally agreed with her friend, carrying him to a safe place to touch down. As she did, Kid Flash rushed across the room, pulling the vines from the Dryads with his speed, while trying to evade the poisonous vines. flipping over some barbs and then cursing as he put on the brakes and ran as Naruto slammed a fist into the ground nearby, shattering a portion of the floor. Coming to a stop and gaping at the black-clad teen, Kid Flash shook his head. Since when was he the son of Zeus? Kid Flash asked only half seriously, while Wonder Girl flew over and pulled him to the ground, a vine lashing out above them. He's not. Zeus's sons rarely had the ability to hurl bolts of lightning like this. The Amazonian girl stated simply, and Kid Flash slapped his face. I wasn't being serious, Donna. He stated, and the girl made an O with her mouth before pulling him with her, as she rolled out of the way of several barbs. We can't keep up like this. He then said, and Wonder Girl gave him an incredulous look. Are you actually getting tired? She questioned, and Kid Flash rolled his eyes before giving her a flat look. No, I mean we can't keep up like this because while I do love this position, it's not exactly helping us survive at the moment. Kid Flash stated, and Wonder Girl blinked before finally realizing she was practically on top of him, and quickly got up and helped him to his feet. Sorry, Bart. She offered, and Kid Flash waved it off only to push her out of the way, and zip off as a dryad with flailing vines coming out of her back lunged at them. Elsewhere, Nightwing flipped over a vine while forming a sword from one of his bird earrings. Holding the weapon, he swung it, slicing the vine in half before landing in a low crouch. Narrowing his eyes, the teen then held out a second bird earring and twisted it in his hands, it forming into his swords as well. Holding both blades in his hands, Knight lunged forwards, evading several barbs from shooter plants, before swinging his blades and cutting a vine in half. Rolling into a crouch, Knight then used his swords to block several more barbs before rolling to the side as a dryad came at him. Twisting on the ground and slicing upwards, the former boy wonder cut the vine from its back. Flipping to the side to evade a spore from a pod, Knight then twisted one blade in hand before lunging at it, and slamming his hand into the pod, ripping the core out soon after. Leaning back quickly to evade as a fly trap tried to snap its jaws around him, Knight then swung both of his blades to cut it from its body. Twisting into a cartwheel to the side to evade, Knight then swung his blades into two dryads, disorientating them before he then brought them forward and up, slicing through their vines easily. Not bad. Batgirl noted as she flipped off of a vine and landed next to her old partner. But when did you get so good with the blade? She asked seriously, and Knight smirked beneath his gas mask before answering. I've been training myself since Zack started using his sword. Never thought it'd come in handy in other battles, though I have to admit it's a pleasant surprise. Knight replied before he and Batgirl turned as another fly trap came towards them. I'll handle this. Knight stated while flipping back and away from the trap. Landing in a crouch, the teen then lunged forward, his swords tipped down to the ground and grinding along it, sparking as he then jumped up onto a vine and then into the air. Throwing his swords up into the air, Knight then quickly pulled 8 exploding discs from his belt and held them between the fingers of each hand. Quickly throwing the discs at the massive plant, he watched as each of the razor-edged discs dug into the stalk of the plant. Soon finished, Knight flipped in the air to evade a flailing tentacle before catching his swords mid-fall. Twirling one blade in hand, Knight then threw it straight for the flight trap, the weapon connecting with one of the exploding discs before setting it off. Flipping backwards and landing on the ground in a sliding crouch. Knight then held his hand to the side to catch his other blade, and twisted around from the momentum of the blade. Wow. Batgirl stated, and Nightwing chuckled while leaning his 2 blades into his shoulders. Vex isn't the only one who's learning new tricks. Knight stated before turning and rushing back into the thick of battle. No, he's not. Batgirl mused before following after one of her oldest friends, and lunging into the fray by his side. As they were doing that, Cyborg and Raven were with Supergirl as they tried to stop the fly traps that were suddenly growing out of the ground. Man, why did Temp have to go ape shit now of all times? Cyborg demanded loudly, and Raven frowned while forming her energy over one fly trap, then gritted her teeth as she ripped it out of the ground, and threw it into one of the others. Breathing into her bangs, the girl then turned to give a slightly dull look to Cyborg. Bad luck. Karma. The universe hates us. Raven then offered with a shrug, and Cyborg groaned under his breath. Why did she always have to do that? Would you both stop talking? We're here to stop these stupid plants, not play 20 questions. Supergirl reminded while Wonder Girl flew past her and then threw a lasso over one of the fly traps. Car. The girl then exclaimed, and Supergirl grabbed the golden rope with Wonder Girl, and both heaved on it. Pulling, they soon ripped the fly trap out of the ground, before moving on to the next one as Cyborg and Raven turned to see more of the snakes from earlier making their way up through the floor. Oh hell. Cyborg muttered to himself, and Raven grimaced as well. Just when you think things couldn't possibly get any worse. Raven intoned flatly with her head tilted to one side, and Cyborg nodded his head in agreement with the gray-skinned girl. We're going to need some major help with all these plants. Cyborg noted, and Raven nodded her head in agreement, turning her head to see Naruto had finally stopped hurling bolts of lightning. She grimaced seeing he now had his swords out. Well, we're also going to need a shoebox for whatever he leaves left of those two. Raven noted, and Cyborg snorted, before shaking his head and lunging at a pair of dryads, slamming into them, and quickly ripping the vines from their backs. Sighing, Raven began floating into the air and off to battle as well. Back with Naruto, the said blonde was never this angry in all his life. These two idiots had officially pissed him off worse than Orochimaru ever could. It was only sheer willpower that kept the Kyuubi's cloak from forming at this point, sheer will and the fact he really didn't need it for them. Roaring out, the blonde teen suddenly teleported, appearing above Harley and Ivy, and bringing his swords down, only for Batgirl and Nightwing to block his strike. Out of my way, kid, those two need to learn a lesson about not messing with someone else's town. Naruto growled out angrily, and Nightwing grunted, while holding the furious thief back. Yes they do. But not from you, X. Knight responded, and Naruto gave a low guttural growl towards the other teen. Big mistake. He rumbled before twisting down and knocked the two heroes off their feet and flipped over them. Roaring out, he brought down both of his blades on the girls, planting them less than an inch from impaling their heads. Alright, you little bitches. Naruto growled out while leaning down towards both of them, said girls hugging one another for dear life. I'm only giving you one more chance, but if you fuck with my city ever again, I swear to all that is sacred and holy in the world, I will hunt you down, find you, kill you, and then bring you back to do it all over again, clone you, then kill the fucking clones as well. You got me? Naruto demanded angrily, and both girls nodded their heads rapidly. However, as that was happening, the man plants around the building began to thrash, the dryad screaming in pain. Oh, what new hell is this? Knight wondered aloud while Naruto looked all around and Ivy grabbed her head, pain visible in her eyes. Stop. Stop. It hurts. It hurts. Please make it stop. Please make it stop. She started screaming and Naruto blinked. But I haven't touched her that much. Naruto mumbled to himself and Harley looked at Ivy before feeling the ground shake and shudder. Alright, what the hell is going on around here? Naruto demanded while pulling his swords up, and then looked all around as the other titans shrugged their shoulders. Seconds later, Naruto got a call and placed his hands to his ear to answer. Shit. Temp, we have a major problem out here. Gizmo shouted and Naruto frowned as he walked away from Harley and Ivy. What's going on, Giz? Ivy's twitching and shaking like she's dying or something. Naruto questioned of the tiny terror and Gizmo took a few quick breaths, the sounds of missiles flying coming from the background. Well, you remember that poison I made to get rid of all the plants? Gizmo questioned and Naruto slowly nodded his head. Well, it worked. All the plants that we doused with the stuff have started to wither and die. Problem is the rest are already starting to try and adapt to the shit. Gizmo mumbled and Naruto's eyes narrowed while turning a brighter red. Would you get to the point already, Gizmo? Naruto demanded angrily, and Giz sighed for a moment before replying. Just look out the window. He stated before cutting the transmission, and Naruto blinked before walking to the window, then widened his eyes. Oh shit. He mumbled, then cursed as giant vines tore through the building at all sides, wrapping around, and then seeming to absorb the other plant creatures into itself. Oh hell, what's going on now? Cyborg demanded, and Naruto braced himself while looking around, and then gritting his fanged teeth. Gizmo's poison worked. Unfortunately, the survivors are pissed off. The teen exclaimed while rolling out of the way as something started to rip its way through the building, a vine grabbing Ivy as it rose up. Red. Harley said in shock, only for a pot to enclose on her soon after and lift her into the air. Harley. Ivy. What the hell is going on? That girl demanded before crying out as a vine grabbed her. Barber. Knight shouted, then cursed while evading a vine himself. The other vines then started grabbing the other titans, while Naruto and Nightwing both flipped out of the building, Raven captured last as the two teens fell towards the ground. Meanwhile, the many mutant moths that had been attacking the building earlier were now being crushed and killed by the plants, as they continued to rise up higher and higher into the air. Got any ideas, X? Nightwing demanded and Naruto narrowed his eyes before holding a hand towards the boy. Only one. Take my hand and trust me. Naruto exclaimed and Knight looked at him incredulously. If you don't, you're dead anyways. The blonde reminded loudly and Knight grabbed Naruto's hand as he used a quick shunshin to teleport onto the roof of a nearby building. Grunting and pushing himself up, Naruto gaped as he saw what they were now facing, Knight voicing his own thoughts. Oh crap. Nightwing mumbled and Naruto nodded his head mutely, eyes wide. The creature was made up of hundreds of different kinds of plants and other vegetation. Spikes visibly formed along its spine, arms which appeared more like very long vine-like roots, growing from where its shoulders would be, and the back of its head. Its mouth was 5 flower petals of some kind, with teeth lining the sides, and folding together into an almost beak shape. Its head was distinctly lizard-like somehow with 3 glowing green eyes. Its massive arms were made up of hundreds of small vines. Barb shooters visible at its shoulders with spore pods down the length of its back. Rather than one vine serving as the root for this beast, it had hundreds of vines arched into the ground to act as its roots. Bark formed along most of its body like armor, giving it a distinctly dragonish appearance. Now that could be a big problem. Naruto noted before zooming in on the creature's throat, then felt disgust well up within him. Within the creature's throat was Ivy, vines wrapped around her and coiling like snakes over her body. Strange thorns were dug into her, and glowing green blood was pulled out of her and into the creature through translucent vines. It's vampirizing her using her blood to stay alive. Nightwing said with no small amount of disgust as he zoomed away from the disgusting scene. Why? She's its mother, why would it do this to her? Naruto questioned incredulously and Nightwing snorted. If it allows her babies to survive, I'd say she's allowing them to do it to her. Night replied and Naruto remembered the girl was certifiably insane. The real problem lies with those pods on its arms. Night then said while zooming in on them, Naruto doing the same and growling low in his throat upon seeing the titans held within them, those leading to the beast's chest where Harley was stationed in a pod as well. What the hell? Naruto demanded and Night frowned. It must be using the others as a sort of shield to ensure no one tries anything against it. Night mused and Naruto gripped his sword's hilts tightly. I'm going to make this thing into mulch for this. Naruto growled out, and Nightwing leaned his broadsword into his shoulder. Get in line, X. Nightwing stated and Naruto narrowed his eyes on the team before spotting Raven on the thing's right arm. I'll take the right arm, you take the left, we free the others, then figure out some way to take it down that doesn't include nuclear weapons. Naruto stated, and Nightwing frowned in thought for a moment before nodding his head in agreement with the blonde-haired ex-shinobi. Agreed. But this is a one-time thing, X. Don't get too used to it. Nightwing quipped and Naruto looked at the teen with a raised brow and a cocky smirk, suddenly crossing his lips. That's my line. Naruto stated before both then turned and lunged towards the creature, Naruto teleporting as Nightwing used his wings to fly over. Landing on the right arm of the creature, the blonde-haired ex-shinobi quickly formed two shadow clones and sent them to either direction away from the creature. Smirking slightly, Naruto then lunged up the length of the arm, several barbed shooters suddenly popping up and firing at the blonde. Smirking as he ran forward, he blocked with his twin ninjutsu. He soon came towards the first of the people pods. He sliced it open and caught Raven. Ew. She grumbled in an annoyed monotone, covered in a sticky green goop, while Naruto continued running up the length of the creature's arm. It's really great to see you again, Kara-chan, but we kind of have a situation here. Naruto stated flatly while motioning up the side of the creature's arm, Raven raising a brow before using her powers to float next to the blonde ex-shinobi. On the other arm of the creature, Night flipped and evaded the many barbs the creature was hurling towards him. Flipping back to his feet soon after, the teen threw a bird airing at the first of the people pods on his own arm, Starfire falling out only for him to catch her. You okay? Nightwing questioned softly and Starfire blinked before smiling up at her friend. I am now. She whispered and Night smiled before looking back up the length of the creature's arm. The others are still trapped, Starfire, let's get to work. Nightwing stated and Starfire nodded her head, flying beside of Nightwing as they went further up the length of the creature's arms. Back on the other side, Naruto and Raven were just coming to the next pods, Raven slicing this one open with her powers, and caught Kid Flash from it. Catching the boy with her powers, she watched him shake his head before grinning up at her. Thanks for the save. Kid Flash said and then rubbed his chin. You know, if you're free later maybe we could. He started to say and Raven frowned. I have a boyfriend. She stated flatly and Kid Flash blinked before he then playfully snapped his fingers. Oh man, all the cute girls always do, don't they? He mused aloud while Naruto ignored the red head. Soon coming on the next pot, he sliced it open, grabbing Beast Boy by his leg. Dude, talk about weird, and man, why do we always get covered in the slimiest, grossest, most disgusting shit in the world? Beast Boy wondered to himself as they continued up the side of the plant's arms. Complain later, we have a job to do right now. Naruto rumbled out at the green teen, and Beast Boy nodded before changing into a pterodactyl and flying with the others, Kid Flash hopping onto his feet and rushing up the side of the arm with them. Back on the other arm, Nightwing and Starfire came to the next pot as well, Starfire using her eye beams to free Wonder Girl and catch her. Ugh, my hair, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever had the misfortune of encountering. Wonder Girl muttered while flinging a string of green slime from her body. Welcome to our world. Nightwing offered with a smirk before throwing a bird airing at the next pod, Cyborg falling out of it. Star, Donna, heads up. Night called and Wonder Girl shot out of Starfire's arms and grabbed the Metal Man by his underarms. Ugh man, I'm seriously going to need a shower after all of this. Cyborg muttered while getting mental agreements from both Wonder Girl and Starfire. What's the situation here, Rob? Cyborg then asked as he looked to his leader, and the set boy pointed to where Naruto and his group were running up their arm. We're going to free everyone then finish this plant off once and for all. Night stated and Cyborg looked at the sheer size of the plant and gaped. How short of a nuclear device do you plan on accomplishing this task? Cyborg asked mockingly and Nightwing twitched slightly. I'm still working that one out. Night admitted as they continued up the sides of the massive plant, soon coming towards the vines on its shoulders. Meanwhile, Naruto and his group were coming towards their last pod, Naruto swinging his swords and slicing the many vines out of their way as they went. Dude, you're a plant-killing machine. Beast Boy exclaimed as he landed next to Kid Flash and tried to keep up, only for Raven to pick him up with a black platform. Why did you change back? Kid Flash questioned and Beast Boy grinned nervously. My arms got tired. He admitted and Kid Flash burst out laughing, before grinning towards the green teen. You and me will get along just fine. he decided before rushing forward as Beast Boy gaped then grinned. Dude. Someone else who thinks I'm funny. Beast Boy exclaimed, and Raven rolled her eyes. Wow, it really is the end of the world. She mused and got a glare from Beast Boy for the barb, while Naruto swung his sword at the last pod, Kid Flash scooping up Batgirl as she spit out some of the green slime. Nobody say a word. The girl grumbled angrily, and the others decided to take the Red Hat's advice, given how she appeared ready to kill someone. Where are Harley and Ivy? Batgirl asked while turning her head as they rushed towards the throat of the massive plant creature. Just up ahead, everyone prepare yourselves. Naruto stated and the group got ready, Batgirl flipping back and onto one of Raven's black platforms, as they got closer to Harley and Ivy. Meanwhile back with Robin and the rest of his group they spotted the last captured Titan and Knight threw a batarang at it, Starfire catching Supergirl as she fell out of the pot and twitched. I officially hate vegetables. She grumbled out before pushing away from Starfire and flying next to the Titans as they continued towards the neck of the creature. So what now? She asked and Nightwing frowned for a moment. First we get Harley and Ivy free, then we can worry about taking this thing down. Nightwing replied while Cyborg sighed in exasperation. In other words, he has no idea. Cyborg offered with a smirk, and Knight gave the Titanium Tina look, while Supergirl giggled into one hand. Coming closer to the massive plant's throat, Nightwing looked to Supergirl and held out a hand. Car. He shouted and Supergirl grabbed his arm before twisting and throwing the black-clad teen towards Harley. Meanwhile on the other side, Naruto smirked, thus deciding not to let the kid outdo him he turned his head. Raven. He called out and the girl made a black wall, Naruto hopping back onto it, and then launching himself towards Harley as well. Naruto and Nightwing then both threw a weapon towards the girl, cutting the pod, while Naruto teleported to Harley, and then threw her up to Nightwing. Catching Harley, Knight fired a grapple and swung back over to his team, while Naruto teleported to rest before Ivy. I know you seriously love your plants, Ivy, but this is really not a good place to be. Naruto murmured only to curse as some form of biological shell formed over Ivy's form. Slamming his hands into it, Naruto growled low in his throat before chuckling darkly. Taking 3 explosive tags he placed them onto the shell and then fell back. Fire in the hole. He cried out, and the other titans began running away as the blonde-haired ex-shinobi grinned beneath his mask. Boom. Naruto exclaimed with a laugh as the explosive notes went off the plant beast roaring out in pain while Ivy fell, only for him to teleport and quickly grab her. Teleporting away the blonde sat Ivy down on the rooftop from before while the titans landed nearby. Well, everyone's safe, but we've still got to take care of that thing. Cyborg noted and Naruto chuckled in his throat while walking forward. Don't worry too much kids, I've got this one handled. Naruto stated while walking past them and then took a quick breath. Alright boys, time to really bring the house down. Naruto stated to himself as he dispelled one of his clones from earlier, feeling a surge of energy flow through his body, before narrowing his eyes dangerously. Senjutsu. Sage mode. Naruto exclaimed as Raven felt a burst of pure power suddenly start to flow off of Naruto's body, while he looked up at the massive plant, then teleported into the air. Grunting as he got into the air, part of the right side of his helmet blew apart, exposing one of his eyes to the world. Opening the eye to show a golden iris with a horizontal slit for a pupil, and red markings around them, Naruto narrowed his eyes dangerously, as the lens for his other eye turned pitch black. Alright, time to finish this baby with one hell of a bang. Naruto thought to himself while his suit started to heat up, what was once black turning white, while his coat, armor and sword remained the only black on him, the X on his mask and chest glowing brightly. Lunging down at the plant he watched as it suddenly spit up a poison cloud at him and mentally scoffed. Sheathing his swords the blonde twisted into a wave of his hands, the resulting wind he created blowing all of the poison away instantly and partly knocked the plant beast down. Whoa, I must have really gotten stronger if Sage Mode does this to my wind chakra manipulation. Naruto thought to himself before bracing his arms against his sides, while the plant fired dozens of barbs at the blonde-haired youth. Chuckling to himself, the blonde twisted and dodged the barbs, the edges of his coat being torn by stray barbs. Grinning to himself, the blonde then continued on his downward ascent towards the creature, as it roared out at him, a long snake-like tongue coming at him, complete with head and jaws, and snapping its own jaws tight over him. Grinning beneath his mask, the blonde then formed chakra around his body while closing his eyes. Senjutsu. 1,000,000 Blades Jutsu. The blonde called out loudly as a sphere of highly condensed blades of wind wrapped around his body. Instantly the head of the snake-like tongue was torn apart from the inside out right down to its molecules. The main plant beast roared out in pain as he did, the blonde flipping in midair, to look down on it as it pulled its tongue back into its mouth. Falling ever closer to the plant, Naruto felt a wide grin start to split across his face, while holding his hands out to slow his descent. Come on, smile ugly. Naruto exclaimed loudly with a wide grin over his face, and the plant roared out at him angrily. Lashing out with hundreds of vines towards the blonde, the plant could only watch on as Naruto pulled his swords from his back, and started to swing them into the many vines, slicing and dicing his way through the vines easily, soon passing them, and drawing ever closer to the enormous plant. Grunting as he felt his power start to wane a bit, Naruto shook his head and narrowed his eyes. Alright, time for a quick charge. Naruto thought while dispelling his last clone, another burst of pure natural energy flowing into his body as the X on his mask started to glow even brighter than ever. Quickly sheathing his blades, the blonde then created 2 clones, one at each of his sides, as they looked around before turning to the original, one grinning under his mask, while the other looked wide-eyed towards him. Aw shit, we're going to be using that jutsu, aren't we? When asked, and Naruto chuckled deviously, while the other clones started whooping in jubilation. Alright Basu. Let's teach this oversized weed, just who's the boss around here. It exclaimed, and both the other clone and the original looked to it. What? He asked them curiously, and Naruto looked to his other clone. Why does he act like we did back when we were dope? Naruto questioned seriously, and the other one shrugged before all 3 started looking down. Alright boys, no more time for chit-chat, let's finish this thing off once and for all. Naruto called out while holding his hands to the sides, each clone moving and forming a swirling mass of wind into their hands as he did the same. Senjutsu. Wind release. Great ball spiraling sphere. The clones and Naruto said at the same time and then placed their hands over Naruto's as he looked down at the plant beast. Alright, now it's time for an Uzumaki Naruto original. Naruto thought to himself before he and the clones merged the 3 Rasengan's into one massive one. Senjutsu, wind release, big great ball spiraling group sphere. Naruto exclaimed as he and the clones slammed the attack into the mouth of the massive plant. Open wide. Naruto shouted over the wind as he and the clones slammed the massive sphere into the mouth of the creature, blown back by a sudden gust of wind once they were flying into the air. Naruto watched as the massive sphere of chakra seemed stuck in the creature's mouth for a moment and snickered darkly. Unsheathing both his swords, the blonde then swung both, a massive X-shaped blast of wind, pushing the sphere down further into the mouth of the beast. Instantly it started to jet through the massive creature's head and neck. The wind element began shredding apart the creature around it, as it went further and further down its body. From the outside it appeared as if some inner force was tearing apart the creature, spiraling down its body and leaving nothing of the creature, but bits and shredded pieces in its wake. Soon inside the beast the sphere dissipated a smaller, yet faster futon. Adama Rasengan continuing its path. Outside Naruto smirked to himself as his clones dispelled themselves to give him back what little power they had left. As they did, the small futon, Adama Rasengan shredded the insides out of the now thrashing wildly plant creature, leaving its outsides relatively fine. Then out of the Adama Rasengan came a rapidly spinning futon. Rasengan, the small sphere spinning faster and faster before stopping and creating a vacuum inside of the beast as it compressed itself. Grinning beneath his mask, Naruto held up a hand and quickly made a seal, while giving a mock salute to the creature. Alright big guy, time for you to go out with a bang. He exclaimed as the futon, Rasengan inside of the creature rapidly expanded, expelling its condensed chakra and wind outwards, and ripping apart the plant creature from the inside out as it did. Who else but me could make a jutsu that starts as a large attack, then decreases in size as it condenses its accumulated mass, and continues to speed up the smaller it gets before expanding into an explosion. Naruto wondered to himself with a mental smirk as he watched the attack do just that. Once the wind had shredded its way through the massive creature, Naruto himself was pushed further up into the air, while the titans ducked out of the way as globs of his flesh and insides were sent flying every which way. Soon standing and looking on to see the massive roots of the plants falling, Cyborg shook his head for a moment before continuing to gape in shocked awe. Wow. Cyborg breathed out in awe seeing the massive amount of damage from the single attack. Dude. Beast Boy exclaimed while gaping in shock and pointing towards the white speck that was Naruto as he still floated in the air. He wasted that thing with one move. Beast Boy exclaimed while Nightwing openly gaped, Raven rolling her eyes as she used one hand to close his mouth. Keep your mouth closed, otherwise a bird might make a roost. Raven offered with a smirk and Nightwing slowly nodded his head, while Supergirl whistled at the amount of destruction caused by the blonde. Fast, strong, brave, and fun. I wonder if he has a girlfriend already. Supergirl wondered aloud and Raven blinked, before turning and looking towards the girl with a raised brow. Supergirl merely whistling innocently as she did so, an amused smirk crossing over her features as Raven scowled. Wow, that's one of the guys you normally fight, Dick. Kid Flash questioned and Nightwing grunted, while rubbing his face. Cyborg, take X off the list for common thieves among our normal villains, and then we seriously have to reevaluate his threat level. Nightwing murmured, and Cyborg nodded his head dumbly while watching Naruto as he continued to fall. Said boy was hitting the teleport button on his belt, only to groan when it started to spark and then steam. Great, the thing's fried. He muttered to himself before being caught by 2 pairs of arms. Looking up he saw Blackfire and Donnie, and then tilted his head. What's with your hair? He asked while looking to Donnie's flaming white ponytail, and she blinked as she looked at his one visible eye. What's with your eyes? She asked in retort, and Gizmo decided to make his presence known as he flew over to the teen with gritted teeth. What the hell kind of shit did you just pull, Temp? You were putting out enough power to, not only fry your suit, but also light up the damn sky like the fucking sun. What the hell did you do? Gizmo demanded angrily while shaking Naruto, and the blonde shook his head before groaning when he noticed he was almost completely out of chakra. Can we please talk about this later? I'm majorly wiped right now, Giz. Naruto pleaded tiredly, while groaning slightly, and Gizmo gritted his teeth before grunting. Fine then, let's get the shit liquor back to base. Gizmo conceded with a deep scowl, Donnie snickering as they started to fly back to Tartarus HQ. Oh yeah, Donnie, Blackfire, you and the other girls are all seriously in for one hell of a training session when I recover. Naruto stated angrily, and both girls groaned. Given his ideas on training aka torture, they were not too happy to learn that. Looks like his team came to get him. Raven noted, and Knight was silent for a moment, then looked over to see a calculative look on Wonder Girl's face. Something on your mind, Donna? He asked, and Wonder Girl nodded her head. It's nothing, but what kind of attack was that? It spins and shreds from what I can tell. Not only that, but it's extremely massive and explodes. I can understand wanting an attack to be effective, but the sheer size alone must be hell to use. One girl noted mostly to herself, and Knight looked at her, then frowned in thought for a moment. Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, X doesn't really know how to use intelligence in the methodology for his attacks. Knight mused aloud while rubbing his chin, and Beast Boy squinted while looking at him with his arms crossed. Dude, speak English. Beast Boy shouted while throwing his arms in the air, and Knight sighed before turning when he heard a grunt, thus watched as Snake and Otacon crawled onto the roof. Officer Connors. You're alive? Knight asked with a blink, while also clearly surprised to see the man who had a radio in one hand as he climbed up a fire escape, and gave him an annoyed-looking response. Yeah, I'm alive, and I called the rest of the JCPD to let him know the coast is clear. I basically told them that they can pull their heads from between their legs and stop kissing their asses goodbye now. Snake grumbled, and Kid Flash and Beast Boy both started laughing, Cyborg joining in as well, while Raven raised a brow with an amused smirk. Unfortunately, that pink X-chick got away. Killer Moth came by and bailed her out. Snake informed, and Nightwing sighed before shaking his head. Why am I not surprised? He wondered, and then turned around to look at the city with the others. Well, looks like the cops are here. Nightwing noted while seeing a van below them and the JCPD waiting on them. Funny how they're only ever on time when we're done beating the bad guys. Raven noted before turning around and looking to Snake with a slim ghost of a smile. Well, all but one or two, I guess. She then corrected, and Snake smirked while Otacon chuckled and adjusted his glasses. Ugh, what hit me? Harley suddenly asked, and Beast Boy suddenly jumped on her and held her down. Hey, get off me. I have rights, you know. Harley started to shout before the JCPD arrived and cuffed her and the still unconscious Ivy. Dragging the girls back down to ground level with the Titans following, they were all treated to Harley ranting. Hey, I wanna hear my rights. I wanna see my lair. She exclaimed while they tossed her and Ivy into the back of the van only for her to poke her head back out. I want a ham sandwich. She then shouted only for a female officer to throw her back into the van roughly, before slamming the doors on the blonde. Ha, new addition. Cyborg asked of Snake with a smirk, the set man merely shrugging his shoulders in response. I think they're taking volunteers now, only one requirement for the job, be stupid enough to be a human meat shield for you guys. Snake offered, and Cyborg, KF, and Beast Boy snickered while Raven shook her head. So, what now? We've beaten Harley and Ivy, survived a killer plant invasion, and made a few new friends along the way. Raven noted while ticking off fingers, and Nightwing nodded his head slowly before then turning around to look at the mentioned new friends. Speaking of which, Supergirl, Batgirl, Wonder Girl, and Kid Flash, it was great working with you guys again. Nightwing said, and the girls waved it off, though Kid Flash sipped over to the former boy Wonder and placed an arm over his shoulders. Then would you mind putting an old pal up? I mean, I like working alone as much as the next guy, but I'd kinda like having someone to watch my back, know what I mean? Kid Flash asked, and Knight looked to Cyborg. The Metal Man grinned as he reached into a compartment in his chest and pulled out a Titan's communicator. Welcome to the team, man. Cyborg offered, and Kid Flash grinned. You play Game Station? Cyborg questioned, and a sly look came over KF's face. Are you joking? Who doesn't? He asked while Wonder Girl shook her head, then walked over to Nightwing. If it wouldn't be too much trouble, Dick, could I also join your team? The Justice League is, well, I just don't feel comfortable with them, and Diana is always fighting with them now, so I haven't been able to fight with a group. And as you know, I prefer working with others, so. Wonder Girl asked, then explained, and Nightwing rolled his eyes as Cyborg and KF argued about something game-related. Sure thing, Donna, and with X-Team out and about, something tells me we're going to need all the help we can get around here. Nightwing offers while pulling a spare communicator from his belt and tossing it to the girl. Looking over to Batgirl and Supergirl, Nightwing smirked towards the two. So, what about you two? He asked the two girls with a small smile, and Batgirl frowned. Sorry, too old to join a group of Teen Titans. She offered playfully, the teens simply, and Supergirl pushed her slightly. You're still young at heart. She offered just as playfully as her friend, and Batgirl nodded her head. This is true, but I don't think I'd fit in here. I'm just too used to Gotham for it. Batgirl mused, and Starfire gave a near silent yes to the sight, and Supergirl chose to ignore it for the sake of not wanting to know. Hey, I'm actually with the JLU now, but I'll see you guys around sometime. But until then, later. Supergirl offered before crouching down and then jetting off into the air and soon enough into the distance where she seemed to disappear. That was such a cool exit. Beast Boy said, and Batgirl gave him a look. It's the only exit she or Superman use. She reminds and Beast Boy babbles before crossing his arms over his chest. Alright y'all, time to head on back to the tower. I've got to teach Speedy here a thing or two about real gaming. Cyborg says while holding Kid Flash in a headlock, the speedster somehow pulling his head free to move in front of the titanium teen. Are you there, Tin Man? He offered before zipping off, and Cyborg growled before chasing after Kid Flash, the others watching them before shaking their heads. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Raven noted with a slim frown, while Beast Boy flew after Cyborg and Kid Flash. Yeah, but let's not forget, we have new titans. Nightwing reminded, and both Starfire and Raven raised a brow towards the boy. Thus, we have to commence with initiations. Nightwing stated with a toothy grin, and Starfire smiled brightly, while Raven smirked evilly, Wonder Girl wondering why she had a bad feeling about this. Elsewhere, Ravager smirked as she looked over dozens of hours of video footage, all of which depicted different battles Naruto had been in, as Red X, as Tempest, and as himself, simply marvelous. She whispered to herself, then felt a presence come up from behind her. What do you want now? She questioned coldly, and then turned around to face one Uchiha Sasuke. What are you doing? Watching all those stupid videos isn't helping us, are you? He reminds, and Ravager shakes her head while turning around, wondering why he couldn't see what she was doing. Actually it does. What I've been doing is watching the actions of the Titans, Tartarus, and your target. Ravager replied while pressing a few buttons, while the other Konohanin walked towards her. So what have you learned? Kakashi questioned, and Ravager hit a few switches show scenes where Naruto went out of his way to protect Raven, others where all he did was stick an X over her mouth, and such. And then showed footage of him visibly flirting and even dating the Dark Titans. First, your target is in a relationship with the Titan known as Raven. The lengths he would go to protect her are simply mind-boggling. He even tore through the city above during the recent attack, almost solely to protect her. Ravager explained, and Ino watched the videos and couldn't help a sigh. I wish I had a guy to treat me like that. She whispered while Hinata felt more and more jealous while watching the screens. Anything else? We know Naruto can do stupid things for the wrong reasons already. Sasuke demanded, and Hinata scowled towards the Uchiha, as did Ino. And what exactly is that supposed to mean? Ino demanded, and Sasuke grunted while crossing his arms over his chest. It means he should look after himself before worrying about some girl. He replied, and Ino felt her fingers twitched as she wished to reach for a kunai. Anyways, that's not my point. My point is, we capture Raven, Naruto comes to us. Ravager said, deciding to derail the situation, and Sakura paled at the thought. Well, deluded she wasn't stupid, well, not completely stupid, and AM seemed even less enthused by that idea. But then Naruto would come at us like a bull if we did that, a very pissed off Kyuubi-empowered wind-controlling bull with swords for horns. Sakura exclaimed, visions of a furious four-tailed Naruto making her whimper lightly. Shit. We'd be lucky if it was only four tails. He'd annihilate us if we touched someone precious to him. Aim shouted in her head while Kakashi shivered, having a fairly good idea how that would end as well. Yes, it's true that might work, but like Sakura said, given our and Naruto's recent past, it's safe to assume that he'd try to actually kill us if we so much as even breathed near the girl. Kakashi reminded, and Ravager nodded her head with a slim smirk on her face. She then brought up several occasions on screen of when Raven and the Titans fought with various villains, yet Naruto never showed up. What the? Kakashi wondered to himself while watching, and Ravager chuckled lightly in her throat. Naruto isn't a fool. Whenever the Titans take on a lesser criminal, he doesn't get involved, no matter how dangerous it seems. When they take on truly violent or evil villains, then he gets himself involved. She replied, and Kakashi slowly nodded his head while looking at the screens. Also, Raven has some level of control over his actions, such as even convincing him to help the city. Ravager went on while waving a hand, and Eiji frowned for a moment while crossing his arms. And since Naruto is trying to hide, that would mean he does indeed care for her greatly, if he's willing to risk exposure for her. Neji noted, and Ravager nodded her head once more before bringing up several other shots. Also, whenever Naruto faces an opponent, he never tries to involve his own team for fear of them getting caught in the crossfire. Ravager stated, and Kakashi nodded his head, seeing what the blonde was doing. Sounds like him alright, since most if not all of his attacks do cause a mass amount of damage and destruction. That's probably why he's always using those gadgets of his, but how does this make a plan? Kakashi questioned while looking to Ravager, who then started changing the different videos to show Naruto fighting against Harley and Ivy. Wow, he's certainly stronger than I remember. Kakashi noted as the boy moved across the vast battlefield of the city, easily decimating everything in his path or that got in his way. Yes, but notice he almost never uses his larger attacks when a Titan or civilian is in the immediate area. Ravager continued to explain, while bringing up a screen, and Kakashi snapped his fingers. Because he doesn't want any of them to get hurt. Kakashi noted and Ravager nodded her head once more before smirking darkly. However, I do have a question. From what you've said, this Uzumaki Naruto was an orphan, correct? Ravager questioned and the others nodded, Kakashi doing so after a moment's pause. Smirking at the pause, Ravager then held her finger over a button and tilted her head to one side. Then explained this. She stated ominously, while a new screen came up, a box zooming in on a picture Naruto was handing to Raven. The picture was of a beautiful woman with similar features to Naruto, though a paler skin tone, deep crimson red hair and bright yellow gold eyes that seemed to flicker like flames. In her arms was a young Naruto, half asleep and with bandages over his face and forearms. Who is that? Sasuke wondered aloud and Sakura gaped at the woman. She looks like no, it can't be. She whispered while Kakashi paled visibly. Uzumaki Kushina. He whispered and the teens snapped their heads to him, Ravager smirking towards the man. Sighing, Kakashi rubbed his face and turned away from them for a moment. The village was never honest with anyone about Naruto, not even himself. He was raised by his mother, Uzumaki Kushina, the Crimson Angel of Uzu no Kuni, until he was 8 years old. Kakashi started to explain, and then shook his head, while Sasuke narrowed his eyes. That's not possible. Naruto had no parents or any living family, he said so himself. Sasuke reminded the older man with a deep scowl across his face, and Kakashi nodded his head slowly. He thought so as well. But Kushina and a girl named Rin were both murdered on his 8th birthday, right in front of him no less. Kakashi started to explain, and both Hinata and Sakura gasped while the others gaped towards him, Ravager merely listening on as he spoke. That same night, Naruto first tapped into the power of the Kyuubi and mercilessly slaughtered the man, ripping him apart till almost nothing was left. It took 10 Anbu to hold him down just so we could sedate him. Kakashi recalled and shivered violently, Sasuke clenching his fists at his sides. So he was an avenger himself, he also knows my pain. Sasuke muttered under his breath while Hinata brought her hands over her arms. Poor Naruto-kun, to be plagued by those memories for so long. Hinata said softly and Kakashi shook his head. Naruto didn't remember it. The Sandaime Hokage feared Naruto would abandon Konoha, or worse, that he might seek out the Kyuubi for its power. So, he decided to seal away all Naruto's memories of his mother, rendering everything he ever learned from her or gained from her, non-existent. The Sandaime went so far as to seal away anything that might have reawakened those memories in the library of Konoha. Kakashi then explained and Neji grit his teeth while clenching his fists at his sides. Then, the things he stole from the library were actually his clan scrolls. Neji demanded of the older Jonin and Kakashi mutely nodded his head. But that means Naruto was justified. Sakura demanded loudly, and Kakashi shrugged his shoulders for a moment. But there's still the sacred scroll of sealing. Ino then reminded and Kakashi grimaced while rubbing the back of his neck. No? That was compiled by the Sandaime, Jiraiya, Orochimaru, Tsunade and my sensei, his father, and was to be passed on to him on his 16th birthday as a gift, since it was passed on to the Yondaime from the others. Kakashi explained and Sasuke frowned, calculating in his head before narrowing his eyes. And he stole it about 4 months after he turned 16. The T noted and Kakashi grimaced as Ino looked at him completely appalled. What the hell, we're chasing after someone whose only crime is stealing what was already his. Ino demanded and Sakura started to gape, before shaking her head. No, of course not, he also attacked several shinobi and broke into Danzo's home, remember? Sakura reminded and Ino still fumed as she turned to Kakashi and stomped over to the man. His idea was it to keep those scrolls from Naruto exactly. Ino demanded and Kakashi grimaced while pulling on his collar. That isn't important anymore, Ino. What is that Naruto obviously no longer has that seal, and that all of his old memories are finally loose in his mind, thus his increase in skill and aggression. Naruto was a very violent child before the seal, openly challenging anyone who made remarks about himself or his mother. Kakashi reminds and then explains to the ground, while Neji nods his head slowly. Yes, but not being able to go to his mother's funeral, living with the thought you've always been alone, constantly being mocked for being an orphan. No one wanted so many things forced onto him that weren't true. A seal ruined his life as well, I see. Neji whispered quietly, and Hinata placed a hand onto her cousin's shoulder, before they all turned to see Ravager clapping. Yes, and well, that was a positively riveting story, Mr. Kakashi. I believe we're getting off topic. Now we look at the facts. Naruto saw his mother die. He protects everyone around him like they might die as well, and let's not forget, he's blinded by the need to get strong enough on his own to defend them, training himself in ways and forms none of you have ever even dreamed, correct? Ravager questioned and Kakashi nodded his head slowly, while wondering how she figured all this out. Right, next few facts: he doesn't interfere with the Titans fighting villains he doesn't perceive as a threat, and yet would protect Raven with his very life. Ravager mused aloud and then pressed a button, the Nin turning and gasping as the Turnian trio lumbered into the room. Yakami, what are those things? Kakashi whispered upon seeing them, and Ravager smirked as she walked towards the three, Cinderblock bowing slightly. My father's 3 heavy soldiers will be ample to lure out the Titans, then my droids, and I will kidnap Raven among the insanity, before bringing her to that lovely little warehouse you were staying at. Afterwards I will send a message to Tartarus giving the exact location of Raven. That way when he comes to save her, he'll be expecting me, not you, well you will all be waiting to surprise him. Ravager explained simply, and Kakashi frowned in thought for a few moments. Why at the warehouse? He asked, and Ravager smirked. My droids may be able to hide in the shadows in an enclosed space like this, but he's the type of fighter where they will need room to maneuver. Also, I have a few new, heavily modified droids I've just been dying to test out. And don't even worry about how you'll hold Raven, I have a few things in mind for that as well. Ravager explains, then said darkly while tapping her chin and walking over to the side, leaving them in with the Turnian trio. Kakashi-sensei, I have a bad feeling about this. Sakura whispered before she tried hiding behind Sasuke, who merely pushed her to the side. So do I. Kakashi whispered while looking at the beings warily. Tartarus HQ. Naruto called out in pain while lying on his stomach as Gizmo peeled another superheated piece of his X-suit off of his body. Damn it, that hurts, Giz. Can't you be a little more gentle? Naruto demanded, and Gizmo snorted, while Jinx helped peel the suit off of him with a slight blush. Hey, you're the moron who went and superheated the fucking thing. Be glad it didn't fuse to your damn skin. I keep telling you not to overload it, but do you listen to me? No, and what do you go and do? You use so much power it fucking bleached the thing. Gizmo grumbled while removing another portion of the now useless X-suit. You're just lucky I'm working on that new suit, or I'd have to kick your ass for this. Gizmo then stated simply while making a mental note to put a limiter on the new suit, so it would never overload like this again. Yeah, well, why is Jinx helping undress me then? Naruto demanded, and Gizmo scoffed. That should be obvious. He started, and Naruto blinked and gave him a look. Donnie chose that moment to poke her head into the room and rolled her eyes with an amused smile on her lips. Clueless, she stated, and Naruto turned only to see the girl had left, making him frown before gritting his teeth as another piece of the suit was peeled off of him. Ugh, damn Giz, why did the fucking thing do that anyways? Naruto demanded, and Gizmo grunted while peeling yet another piece off of him. Yo. Damn it, would you stop doing that? Naruto demanded, and Gizmo snorted. Whatever, and as for the reason why it did this, it's because your stupid ass overloaded the power grid of the suit. The circuits have fused with the rest of the suit and superheated it, thus the bleaching, and your fusing of the suit to your skin. Gizmo replied while making a note to put some kind of a cooling unit into the suit as well. Ugh, yeah, well, how was I supposed to know it was going to do that? Naruto demanded, and Gizmo smacked him on the head with part of the damaged suit. Because Psycho, I told you your powers are very similar to Jinx's. Thus, use too much of it and electronic shit blows up. I think that might actually be why your people didn't have that many electronics. Gizmo explained, and Naruto blinked, then considered that, seeing as it was a very valid reason, well, it was something to think on, at least grimacing. He then turned to see Jinx bite her lip, as she had pulled yet another piece of the suit off of him, leaving him clad only in his black boxers. Finally, Naruto murmured while rolling off of the table, and then picked himself back up from the floor. You have no idea how good it feels to be free of that, Naruto said mostly to himself while rubbing his head, and Gizmo rolled his eyes. Yeah, well, go get some rest, temp, you look like shit. Gizmo stated, and Naruto nodded his head while pushing himself back to his feet and making his way out of the room with a visible grimace. Watching the blonde go, Jinx released her breath and a blush nearly consumed her face. Does he have to look so good even though he's taken? She wondered aloud, and Gizmo made a face. Ugh, I don't want to hear about it. The tiny terror exclaimed, and Jinx blinked, then rolled her eyes and walked off. Finally gone, now I can actually get back to work. Gizmo murmured while getting back to work on the new Red X-Suit 3.0. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.